If your teen is about to turn 18, maybe you've seen some different checklists online. Get your medical power of attorney, get your HIPAA release.
But what if those lists don't tell the whole story? What if there's more that exists that you haven't heard about yet? Hi, welcome to Thoughtful Planning. I'm Honey, a mom, an end of life doula, and a business owner.
And I'm Santiago. I'm a high school teacher and a veteran. We're on a mission to make planning the what ifs in life a whole lot less scarier.
So, we've been discussing the foundational documents since episode 56, and today we're doing a recap specifically focused on health related forms.
So, what brought this on?
So, I've been going through replays of my end of life doula planning class, and some things were discussed that I felt were very important to share.
So, before we move on to the statutory durable power of attorney, we wanted to take a quick pause and fill in some gaps that we've noticed.
So, before we go any further, our usual reminder we are not attorneys, doctors, or financial advisors. Everything we share is for educational purposes only.
So, we're based in Texas. That's where we live. When we talk about specific forms, we're talking about Texas legal forms. Remember, laws vary state by state. So please research your own state laws or talk to a estate planning attorney for your legal guidance.
We'll share information about what forms exist and what they generally do, but we cannot tell you what forms you or your family specifically need since every situation is different.
Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on health-related forms. There's other documents out there beyond these health forms that may be relevant to your family, so keep that in mind as you're doing your own research.
And here's our essential question for today. What health-related forms have we discussed, and what new information have we learned that might be helpful for families to be aware of?
So keep that question in mind as we walk through this together. And then, of course, like we always do, we're going to circle back to it at the end.
And let's start by recapping the health-related forms we've covered in prior episodes. So in episode 61, we talked about how these forms work together like a team.
Right, we were talking about the voice, the hands, and the eyes.
Exactly. So let's walk through them in the order we covered them. First is the living will, which in Texas is called the directive to physicians and family or surrogates. We discussed this in episode 56 through 58. This is the voice. It allows a person to express their wishes about life-sustaining treatment in certain medical situations.
So the living will speaks for you when you can't speak for yourself.
Right. And next is the medical power of attorney, designation of healthcare agent, or MPOA. We covered this in episodes 59 and 60. This is the hands. It allows someone to name a person to make medical decisions on their behalf if they are unable to communicate.
So think of this as the hands that carry out your wishes.
Now, one thing we neglected to share in those episodes is who can sign as your agent and who can serve as a witness. There are specific rules about that. For example, certain people, like your attending physician or employees of a healthcare facility where you're a patient, cannot serve as witnesses. So please refer to the instructions and disclosure statement on the medical power of attorney form for the full details on who can and cannot sign and witness.
Yeah, that's a great catch. What you don't want to have is that conflict of interest come up while you're needing this to be executed. It's a very important detail.
And then in episode 61, we covered the HIPAA authorization. This is the eyes. It allows healthcare providers to share medical information with people you designate. It doesn't give someone the power to make decisions. It gives permission to share information.
So now we have the voice, the hands, and the eyes that all work together.
Exactly. Each of these forms serves a different purpose, and together they work as a team.
Now, there were also two other forms that we discussed way back in episode 33 they came up again when you were listening to your class replays, correct?
Yes. The first is the Mental Health Directive, which Texas calls the Declaration for Mental Health Treatment. If your child has had mental health conditions, this form might be helpful because it covers things like medications and how you want to be helped if you have a mental health episode.
And what was the second one?
That would be the Dementia Directive. This is one to be aware of, especially if dementia runs in your family. But even if it doesn't, it's worth considering while you're clear of mind. The idea is to document your wishes before you're in a situation where you cannot express them.
So, does Texas have a specific dementia form, dementia directive form?
No, Texas does not currently have a state dementia directive form, but you can add it as an addendum to your living will. I recommend listening to episode 33 for more information.
So, we've done episodes also on organ donation and brain donation. How does that fit in?
So a person could add their choices about organ, brain, and body donation to their living will, and we always recommend you tell your family your choices. Don't just write it down and assume they'll know.
So, what else is important about choices of organ, brain, and body donation?
Well, all of these require additional steps by the person while they are living and of sound mind. So for organ donation, you might consider registering with your state, and you can learn more in episode 9. For brain donation, you would register with a specific research program. And I talked about brain donation in episode 42. And it's important to stress that when donating your brain, it's for science and not for another living person.
Really?
Really.
Hmm. Okay. So, tell me more about a full body donation.
All right. So if someone wants to donate their full body to science, most programs need the body intact. That means they usually cannot also donate organs or brains separately. So a person would need to choose, and they would need to complete paperwork with that specific program ahead of time.
It sounds like, yeah, you really need to plan this out pretty thoroughly, huh?
Yes, my instructor also mentioned having a backup plan because not everybody is accepted. If that happens, the individual might want to ask about other options. But I would caution that something like brain donation as a backup would require having already applied with a brain bank. So if someone is considering this, they should ask the specific programs about their circumstances and what options might be available.
Hmm. So, if everybody's body is not accepted, what other questions should someone ask if they're considering a full body donation?
Well, things like, can family visit after death? And if yes, where? And how long before remains are returned, if at all? And what form will the remains be in? These details can matter for the grieving process. So it's very helpful to understand the process and communicate your wishes and the process to your family members. My teacher actually said that she was considering this as an option, and her kids said, "No way, Mom, we are not going to have you do that." And so she did not want to put them through that, so she chose something different. So again, it's up to you what you want to do, as long as you're communicating it with your family and everyone understands.
I guess that would be a two-way street. I mean, because if you wanted to do something, you've already told me this is what I want you to do, and if you won't do it, I'm gonna find somebody else to be my person.
Right.
So I guess if whatever your convictions are, you're gonna have to find that right person to follow that through for you. So, did anything else come up in your class replays?
My instructor reminded the class that some hospitals and physicians may have their own forms they want on file. Even if someone has completed state forms, a hospital might ask them to complete the facilities version before a procedure.
So, paperwork that you do today might not be one and done.
Right. And here's something important. She has seen situations where patients gave their documents to a hospital to have on file, and then on the next visit, the documents were not in the system. So it's a good idea to always follow up and bring your own copies with you.
I guess that's really frustrating. I guess every time you go, hey, can you see my stuff? Can you see my stuff? Kind of deal. And it's
Yes.
pretty good to be aware of all that.
So I also learned that if someone is facing a medical procedure and has not completed forms yet, they can ask the hospital for help. In some facilities, a nurse might be able to help, or they might have social workers who can assist. But ideally, this is something to think about ahead of time rather than in the moment.
Are there any additional forms that we've mentioned but haven't really gone into great detail with?
Yes, these are forms that are typically discussed in the context of very serious or advanced illness. They are not commonly completed by healthy individuals, but it's good to know they exist.
Really? What are they?
So the first is the out of hospital do not resuscitate order, or OOH-DNR. And in Texas, this is a form that directs emergency medical personnel not to perform CPR if a person is found without a pulse outside of a hospital setting. It's a physician's order, meaning it requires a doctor's signature.
So this isn't really something that a person can complete all by themselves.
Correct. It involves a conversation with a physician and requires their signature.
What about a pulse?
So, POLST stands for Physician Orders for Life Sustaining Treatment, and some states call it MOLST, which stands for Medical Orders for Life Sustaining Treatment. Really depends on your state. So, these are portable medical orders for people with serious illness. They cover topics like resuscitation, comfort measures, and other treatment preferences. Like the OOH-DNR, these require a healthcare provider's involvement.
Okay. So for families dealing with serious illness, these would be conversations to have with their medical team probably early.
Exactly. The medical team can explain what these forms are and whether they might be appropriate for a particular situation.
So you also mentioned something earlier when we were talking that you learned something pretty interesting.
Yes, so in some states, like Michigan, the person you name as your healthcare agent has to sign a form accepting that role before they can act. It's called a patient advocate acceptance form.
So it's really not just you naming somebody, but they have to formally accept that role to perform the duties that you're asking them to.
In Michigan, yes. This is why we encourage people to research their own state requirements. What's true in Texas may not be true where you live. But again, like we've been stressing throughout this topic, is to always communicate. You want to ask that person who's going to be your person if they want to be your person, if they could follow your wishes. So at least verbally, but I actually kind of like that Michigan takes that extra step in having them sign a form. I just think that's an extra, buffer. It's
Yeah,
a,
I'm not
it's
one for extra paperwork, but I think that that's a good idea so that they clearly understand what's expected of them and they're not like, surprise, this is what you got to do. And they're like, I didn't sign up for this.
right.
And then we also have to keep in mind that sometimes laws change over time.
Exactly. Texas laws can change too. So something we've shared in our episodes might have changed by the time you're listening. So it's a good practice to verify current requirements and review documents periodically, at least once a year, or whenever something significant changes in your life, like a move, a marriage, or a health diagnosis. And while you're doing those changes for yourself, always looking at your state requirements to see what has changed.
Yeah, I think that something we probably need to add there is that if you're going on a trip, especially overseas, something like that, where you might need to just review it and make sure that your paperwork's in order for that trip. And I know we're talking specifically to parents of soon to be teens that are turning into adults, but here's something that we also discovered for veterans. since I'm a veteran and we're covering these health documents, we feel that it's pretty important to share to make sure that fellow veterans understand what's going on.
So, this really goes back to what my instructor said about asking medical facilities if your state forms are enough or if you need forms specific to that facility.
Right. So, if a veteran wants someone other than themselves to access their VA benefits or claim information, there's a specific VA form that covers that. It's called the VA Form 21-0845, Authorization to Disclose Personal Information to a Third Party. And what's something else that we discovered is that's a federal form, so it covers the whole United States if you're going to a VA hospital.
So, this is separate from other medical or financial documents. The VA has its own system and its own forms.
Yes, it does. And I'm actually getting ready to go through this process myself to make sure that I'm covered with the VA. So we may share some more information about that in future episodes once I've completed these forms now that I know about them.
So, let's recap what we've covered today.
We're going to recap the recap. We've discussed health related forms we covered in episodes 56 through 61. The living will, which is your voice, from episodes 56 to 58. The medical power of attorney, designation of healthcare agent, ooh, that's a mouthful, which is your hands. We covered that in episodes 59 and 60. And the HIPAA authorization, which are your eyes. We covered that in episode number 61.
We also noted that there are specific rules about who can sign as an agent and who can witness the medical power of attorney. So be sure to read the disclosure statement and instructions on that form.
Yeah. And we also talked about the mental health directive and the dementia directive in episode 33.
We talked about the consideration of adding organ, brain, and body donation choices to the living will and communicating your wishes with your family, as well as completing any required registration steps while you're of sound mind. And we discussed organ donations in episode 9 and brain donation in episode 42.
We've shared some new insights about hospitals sometimes wanting their own forms, the importance of keeping copies and following up and making sure that we review these. And these forms are related to serious illness like the OOH, DNR, the POLST, or the MOLST, depending on your states.
We also mentioned that some states have additional requirements, like the Patient Advocate Acceptance Form, that Texas laws can change over time, and that veterans have specific VA forms to be aware of.
So, if you find this information helpful, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Amazon Music, and YouTube.
And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you're notified when new episodes come out.
If you have any questions and you'd like to reach out to us, you can do that at info@legacytoolkit.com. So let's circle back to that essential question. What health-related forms have we discussed, and what new information have we learned that might be helpful for families to be aware of?
Well, today we recapped the health related forms we've covered from episodes 56 through 61, including the living will, medical power of attorney, and HIPAA authorization, which work together as the voice, hands, and eyes. We also discussed the mental health and dementia directives from episode 33, donation choices, forms related to serious illness, state specific requirements, and the VA specific form for veterans.
Yeah, so you might have to listen to this episode more than once to make sure you're taking notes, right? So I think that the most important takeaway is that every situation, every state is different. Make sure you research your state's laws, verify current requirements, and if you have any questions, reach out to your estate planning attorney so that you cover your family's needs.
Thank you for joining us today. In our next episode, we'll be discussing the statutory durable power of attorney, which focuses on financial matters rather than health.
Because it's all about the money, honey.
Remember, every chapter you write today shapes your legacy tomorrow. Thank you for joining us at Thoughtful Plan.